This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
My fellow Australians, I've got something to say. I'm the man for the job come election day. I'll hit right for 6, I've got all the tricks. I'm the Prime Minister in Aussie politics. I've been here since 96 and I'm doing swell. I take care of the young and the old as well. From the city to the surf to the RSL. What up, mud diggers?
Opposition in the House of Representatives. Represent!
I make way for me. I'm the RU-double-D. I'm the flyest mother rudder that you ever did see.
Content, loading, takes, buffering.
Hello, patrons. It's Tom and Emerald again. Oh, what do you know?
Oh my gosh, it's just us.
Can you believe it? Thanks very much for supporting the show, Serious Danger, this podcast about Greens politics in Australia. It's not an official Greens Party podcast. It's made possible with the help of the Green Institute and produced by Michael the Griffin, who just before we started told me to choose the right microphone to record this. And this is why we need him, these basic
That's
steps.
why, yeah. It's thanks to you, dear patron, that you have Tom sounding crystal clear right now. Because if you hadn't contributed your $3 or more a month to make this show possible, we wouldn't be able to pay Mike to tell Tom to switch his fucking microphone.
Love it when a plan comes together. For this episode, we are taking a trip down memory lane to reminisce about the highs and lows of the 2007 federal election.
Whee!
Memories. Looking forward to that.
I was trying to think of a name for this series and I was like, Electrospective. But then it sounds too much like electrocution. I think it got confusing. So if anyone has any ideas, let us know.
Get in touch. Another reminder, we are doing live shows in New South Wales. We know you already know this, but in case you haven't told all your friends and family, get them along. Newcastle, you are selling so well. There are not that many tickets left for our live show in Newcastle on Saturday, November the 23rd at 2 p.m. at the Newcastle Comedy Club as part of the People's Blockade and Rising Tide's big old protestival down at the Newcastle forefront there. We know this isn't going to lower emissions, as Chris Bowen let us know. That's not how you do anything. Protest doesn't work.
Boo.
You need to be in a hollowed-out Labor Party in order to change anything. But we thought we'd go have a look anyway. So if you're in Newcastle and you want to come, I would get on to buying tickets, please.
Attending our show
November
will lower
23rd.
emissions. I can guarantee that.
Yes, that's very true.
Yeah.
Getting on a plane and flying to Newcastle.
And flying to Newcastle to attend our show will lower emissions. Yeah.
That's science. The next day, Sunday, November 24th at 1:30 p.m. at the Vanguard in Sydney, in Newtown. That's the other live show. All the details at seriousdangerpod.com. We will stop talking about this. We're working on guests at the moment too. They will be announced in the coming weeks. We're excited about some of the names we're pulling together to join us live on stage. So be there or be square.
Yeah. Tom, do you want to talk about your little show?
Yes, I do. It's called The Referendum Special. I just released it in the past week, and I think patrons and all friends of the pod might get a kick out of it. It's all my wacky jokes about the referendum last year. It's been 1 year since the Voice referendum and that depressing day. And if you want to laugh about it, then why don't go to the Tom Ballard YouTube channel and watch The Referendum Special.
So easy for us to look back and laugh. Easy for someone like Tom.
Well, there's a lot of anger in there too as well. But you can have a look. Emerald's seen these jokes live on stage.
Have I?
Yes. Well, yes. This is the special, like the referendum stuff that was out of the show Good Point Well Made, which you came to see.
Right. I did come to see that. Good point. Well made, Tom.
Thanks, Emerald. Appreciate it. Emerald, we're talking about the 2007 federal election. I believe this is your suggestion originally. Why did you want to cast your mind back to this incredible time in Australian political history?
So maybe it was partly because, I thought it would be fun to do some election retrospectives, partly because this was an assessment that I did in uni that I really enjoyed. That makes me sound like a fucking loser, doesn't it? But we had in one of our courses, one of the assessments is you pick 2 federal elections in Australia and you analyze them and learn all about them. And I did 2001 and 2007. And as someone who knew very little about politics at the time, it was a really good way to just kind of be understand the dynamics and a little bit of Australian politics history. But I also just think I think, certain elections, it's a good little zeitgeist. It's nostalgic, and 2007 was a real, I think, turning point for a lot of people around my age as well.
I think that's certainly true. And I think I want to talk more about this. I guess also we have elections on the brain, of course. There is a federal election going to be happening some point between now and May of next year, which really isn't that far away when you think. I know your
God.
world is consumed by the Queensland election as we record this, but
Uh-huh.
there's that big federal one that's coming as well. Did you see this week the Coalition has recorded a two-party preferred lead over Labor for the first time since 2022, according to the latest news poll? The last one they were sort of tied, but the latest poll has them at 51-49 for the Coalition.
As a result of, like, to at least some extent, a result of One Nation vote increasing 1 point and Greens down 1 point, so notional preferences, I think, push Coalition over the line, which is interesting.
Right. Yeah, okay. Interesting. What are your enduring memories of the 2007 election? Or I guess perhaps also studying at uni? What are the big memories?
No, I remember the 2007 election itself. I shout out to friend of the pod and of mine and good comrade Izzy, who I said that I was recording this episode tonight, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I think 2007 was the first time I realized that the Prime Minister could change." And I was like, "That's such a good way to explain it." She's a bit old, like a few years younger than me, but even so, that was kind of the vibe. It was like, wait, we could actually change. I had never really been conscious of that idea before, and Kevin 07 was fucking huge. And what I remember is I had this friend Tui who was a real nerd, and he would always do shenanigan-y things like taking a school notice about an assembly, and he would like take it home and scan it and Photoshop it to say funny jokes and then distribute it around the school with like the school logo. Good stuff. And he came to school wearing, and potentially even like, I think he gave us Kevin 07 shirts, and we put our shirts on until we were like hauled into the principal's office and told that you weren't allowed to wear political, paraphernalia or shirts at the school. So I remember it. I remember it well.
Students had to be sensible centrists. Had to be like
right.
Journalists.
And we said, how dare you infringe on our implied right to the freedom of political expression in the Australian Constitution? Probably Tui said something like that.
Awesome. I had a T-shirt. I had a Kevin 07 T-shirt. I don't think I did anything at all sort of actively, but I just remembered the T-shirt. Everyone was talking about it. Yeah, I mean, that's it, because John Howard was just politics, right? Like the Australian Prime Minister was John Howard for as long as you knew what the Prime Minister was, as long as you watched the news. Yeah. He was the guy forever.
I think in my mind I was like, Prime Minister equals bad. Like I was just like, the guy that is the Prime Minister is bad. I didn't consider that you could have like a good Prime Minister. I mean, not that obviously we'll get into it, but you know what I mean.
Not the little wizard gnome who was always going for walks and shit at cricket. Exactly. What are you doing in 2007 as the election is happening? What is happening in the life of little Emerald Moon?
Well, I was in year 7. I was in my first year of high school. So, I mean, that was it, really. I was learning how to be almost a teenager. Not quite a girl, not yet a woman. What's the song?
Your body was changing. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. I actually do think I got my period that year. I think that was the year I got my period, everyone. 2007.
Oh, cool.
There you go. What about you, Tom?
Wow. A great year for red across the board.
That's right. I showed my support.
Oh, so nice. Well, I was in my final year of high school, which is fucking depressing that we were at other ends of the spectrum there. Old. But yes, 2007, I mean, year 12, I'm old. Finishing high school, big year for me. I came out to a bunch of people, and towards the end of the year, and I remember I couldn't vote in the election because my birthday is the 26th of November and the election was on the 24th. So we was
wow, you could have voted. Wow, amazing.
I could have voted. Pretty close. And I distinctly remember the morning after the federal election, because I was directing an amateur musical theatre production of Jesus Christ Superstar. And we started the rehearsal off by gathering everyone together. I said, well, everyone, I guess we have a new Prime Minister. And everyone broke out into applause. Incredible stuff.
Applause. Oh my fucking God.
Yes.
And then you were like, and guys, you're not going to believe this, but I'm gay.
It's a great moment for the country. And I think in this moment, I just want to let you know, I suck dick. Oh, brilliant. But you were a little bit political aware because didn't you went on anti-war marches, right? We've discussed this before on the show. In 2003, weren't you marching against the Iraq War?
Yes, but I feel as though that's just what you did. Like it's I grew up in the Northern Rivers. I didn't think I was political, but it's just the assumption was that yes, obviously my parents are like, you know, anti-war and I don't know, whatever, socially progressive, etc. But I didn't understand how politics works. I didn't understand how elections work. I didn't really know anything, but I knew I didn't like John Howard because he liked war. That's probably what I knew.
I think that's all you need to know about John Howard, and members of the Australian press should keep those basic lessons in mind to this day.
That's right.
But there you go.
They could learn a little something from 12-year-old Emerald.
Yeah. Let's cast our minds back. The year is 2007. Fergie and Avril Lavigne are in the charts. Everyone's watching Summer Heights High. Rove McManus is hosting Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
Uh-huh.
Remember that show?
I do remember that show. I always had a bit of a complex. Well, so I was like a smart kid, but I wasn't a general knowledge smart kid. That just wasn't something that was taught in my house. Like I wasn't a trivia person. And so it would like piss me off because I knew I would do badly on those kind of shows, even though that was the measure of whether you were a smart child. And so I think I was like, fuck those shows. They don't they don't measure intelligence.
But you must have been smarter than a fifth grader. You were in year 7.
Well, I didn't watch the show. I never learned whether I was smarter than a fifth grader, but I didn't need to watch them, Tom. I knew.
All right, mate. All right. The coalition Howard government has been in power for 11 years. They have a majority in the Senate. They got a majority in like 2005, and they've been going hog wild with that. They use that to push through the work choices legislation, which we'll obviously get to. But I mean, yes, I think the general perception is that in that last term, after 11 years, the Howard government was a bit sort of high on its own supply and was sort of kind of disconnected from not realizing what kind of conservative lizards they were and how far away they were from public opinion on basic questions like the welfare state and how much power that workers should have. So that's kicking around. And you've got this insane, leadership tension between Howard and Costello that was kind of the Gillard Rudd or the leadership scandal of its day. It was kind of ever evolving, and Costello did maintain that Howard had promised to hand on the reins, just like Hawke had promised to Keating back in the day. And there was a lot of backgrounding, but no one was prepared to do the thing and like stab Howard in the back because he was the greatest liberal prime minister since Menzies, and everyone loved him. So unless he prepared to step down, then no one was going to prepare to take him on.
Yeah, so like I remember being aware of Costello but not really understanding how these things worked, not really knowing who that was.
It is truly crazy, and I know everyone's remarked on this, but the fact that Peter Costello was a conservative treasurer of the country and Tim Costello, the head of World Vision, constantly saying, hey, poverty's bad and we should tax the rich and Australia sucks on the global stage. And there were two brothers.
They're actually brothers, like real brothers?
Tim Costello and Peter Costello, they're brothers. Yes, they're actual human brothers.
Oh, actual real human brothers. Yeah, that is weird.
In 2007, also remember the APEC conference is happening in September. So, of course, we're obviously peak war on terror as well. Things are getting truly horrific. They're already horrific, but getting really bad in Iraq. George Bush comes out in 2007 for the APEC conference. That's happening at the Sydney Opera House. You've got the chaser stunt pretending to be Osama bin Laden trying to get access to APEC and getting very far.
This is where I get confused about my own brain because when you were like, oh, this was the chaser stunt was this year. And in my mind, I'm like, I did not know or give a shit about politics at all. But real serious danger heads will remember at some point early on in the show, I revealed that I was like obsessed with the Chaser's War and everything. And I had all the DVDs and I would watch it over and over again and like memorize scenes. And of course, I remember the iconic Chaser APEC stunt where they like snuck in barely even needing to sneak because the whole joke was that they said it was the best security ever and they just like waltzed on in. So I remember that, and I remember like laughing at things like that, but I guess without really having that much deep kind of context on the importance of it.
Yeah, it was all playing out there. I mean, we sort of just knew people, right? You knew Osama bin Laden, he did that bad thing on 9/11, but you didn't really know, I guess, what the protest was about or what we're directed at. Or I think at this point I was across the fact that George Bush sucked and he was no good.
Yeah.
And he was against gay marriage in 2004. That was a big deal. Yes. So that's a broader conservative context. On the Labor side of things, of course, the 2004 election was led by Mark Latham, very normal man who's gone on to wonderful things and really contributed to public life in this country. Labor lost 5 seats in that election. I don't think I quite realised that. Down to 60 seats compared to the coalition's 27. So the coalition have a majority of 27 seats. Sorry, the coalition's 87 seats.
Right, yeah.
Sorry, so that's a majority of 27 seats. I get maths. So after Latham lost, he resigned from politics, and then you had your Simon Crean situation, I think, maybe, and then Kim Beazley took over there. But anyway, December 2006, Kevin Rudd runs for the leader of the Labor Party and wins, defeats Kim Beazley. He's the shiny new guy, Mr. Little Lego Man, is now leading the Labor Party. Before he got the prime ministership, of course, he did eat his own earwax.
What the fuck?
Parliament. We've seen footage of this.
I haven't.
Do you remember this? You've never seen this?
No. Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding at all.
Clicking the link.
I can't believe you've never heard about this.
No, that's insane. That's disgusting. Do I even want to watch this?
Is the Minister concerned that residents have been circulated with by the Minister for Trade, the member for Lyne, saying that, and I quote, "I would like to assure you that residents who occupy accommodation on a..."
Oh, my God.
I mean, this is going to be great for people listening to the podcast, but I assume most people are familiar with this footage. Anthony Albanese is giving a speech. Kevin Rudd's sitting behind him in Parliament. He's bored out of his mind. He dips his little finger into his ear and then whips around and has a nice little nibble on
I've never understood the eating. Like the picking your nose and eating it thing. I've never understood the wanting to taste it. Like, I don't understand it. It makes me feel so ill. I can't imagine. Anyway, wow, that's psychotic. And this man became prime minister. Go on. Sorry, spoilers.
The Labor Party looked at that man and thought, that's our leader. We got to get this guy in charge of our defence forces. Yeah. Actually, speaking of, I didn't know this. Okay, you know how Labor's always trumpeting it's like had the right position on the Iraq war and it was support of the troops, was against the action. Rudd became the shadow cabinet, the shadow minister for foreign affairs after the 2001 defeat. In 2002, he met with British intelligence and helped define the position that Labor would take in regards to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. There is no debate or dispute as to whether Saddam Hussein possesses weapons of mass destruction. He does. There's no dispute as whether he's in violation of UN Security Council resolutions. He is. I've never heard that quote before and no idea that he was so spectacularly wrong on the crucial issue of 2003.
Wow.
What a shit show.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the guy. Yeah, wow, that's pretty damning.
Pretty like black and white. And I guess it's just not told in part of the history of Labor's position on the justification for the invasion of Iraq. And I guess a good indication of Kevin Rudd's character, which is regularly would just say whatever the fuck he thought he needed to please the establishment, and basically, you know, he's never taking massive chances or anything like that, and says whatever he believes has to say in that particular moment with incredible force and often in quite an articulate way that makes him look like he's really determined, he knows what he's talking about. And then, of course, history proves him to be embarrassingly wrong, and that gets swept under the carpet and never is
very confidently wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, before the election on the 19th of August, it was revealed that Kevin Rudd, while on a visit to New York City as Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs, had visited a strip club in September 2003 with New York Post editor Cole Allen and Labor MP Warren Snowden. Do you remember this?
No.
You don't remember this scandal at all? Okay. By way of explanation, Rudd said, "I had had too much to drink. I have no recollection, and nor does Mr. Snowden, of any incident occurring at the nightclub or of being asked to leave. It is our recollection that we left within about an hour. The incident generated a lot of media coverage, but made no impact on Rudd's popularity in the polls. Some believe the incident may have enabled Rudd to appear more human and lifted his popularity.
It was a setup. So, but what incident occurred? Because you started by saying that the story was that he'd visited a strip club, but then he's referring to an incident occurring and being asked to leave.
Yeah, I think it was them being drunk and a bit sort of rowdy. I don't think anything of any particular note happened, but there was also, a scandal. The idea that a shadow minister for foreign affairs would be going to a strip club at all while on a work trip. People were grasping their pearls, and I think maybe it also was used to undermine Rudd's presentation of himself as a good Christian boy.
Oh, was that a thing, was it?
You don't remember? Oh, he was Christian as hell.
Oh, okay.
I believe he cited his faith as a reason as to why he didn't support marriage equality too.
Really? No, I didn't know anything about him, really. All I knew was that he was the person who was going to save us from John Howard. And then he gave us laptops. That guy.
Those are the main things, yeah. I mean, he was extremely popular despite all this. I mean, yeah, and stories like this come out, everyone had a big laugh about him going to a strip club.
Yeah.
And then people were like, oh, maybe this guy's a little bit like me, the typical Aussie bloke who loves seeing Sheilas whip their gear off. And he was very popular. Like, as soon as he gets announced as the leader, he gets a 10-point jump in the polls, yeah.
And was seen as a very strong media performer. Like, that is one thing that I remember. I remember the Chaser referring to him a lot as a media slut and talking about how much he just loved the media. And that was the idea, is that like the media loved him, he loved the media, and the whole country loved him.
Yeah. Which, I mean, yeah, didn't he sort of courted the Murdoch media, of course, famously, and like, even though now he's Mr. Anti-Rupert, of course, when he was running to become Prime Minister, he was
relationship
happy to play the game with
yes.
Yeah, somewhat. Well, I watched a 60-minute story profile on him, which again was just an absolute joke piece of journalism. But I forgot about his very annoying habit of asking himself questions that he then answers. So it's like, am I a Mother Teresa figure in politics? No. Do I attack the mob when I think they deserve it on the other side? Then yes. And it's like, it's infuriating to watch. It's kind of a genius position, though, to just like be like, oh, I don't like that question you asked me, so I'm going to ask myself some questions and give the answers that I like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Genius. Where are the Greens in all this? Well, we have 4 senators in the federal parliament. You got Bob Brown, Kerry Nettle from New South Wales, Christine Milne from Tassie, and Rachel Stewart from WA, who'd been elected in 2004. In the 2004 election, had a 2.2% swing towards us in the House of Reps, a national primary vote of 7.19%. So slowly growing, chipping away, still nothing in the lower house, still doing what we can, trying to cut through.
Just trying our best.
This is from Paddy Manning's Inside the Greens. Bob Brown and Kerry Nettle were up for re-election in 2007. Having developed a proper national strategy, the party took a more professional, evidence-based approach to the 2007 election. There was a fundraising strategy, for example, aiming to raise $750,000 for the federal campaign, of which $600,000 would come from high net worth individuals. The strategy bore fruit. Donations to the Australian Greens kicked up in 2007-2008, falling just short of the target with $745,000, a new high. And there were some interesting names. Wealthy Sydney-based bookmaker Greg Bairn, outraged by the Guns 2.0 case, gave $200,000 to the Tassie Greens. In WA, stalwart Ruth Gribble, who had been donating to the party since 1999, dug deep and kicked in $123,500. Unions that had been lukewarm supporters since the Greens went into bat for workers in Howard's early R reforms and the waterfront dispute donated almost $250,000 this time, dominated by the ETU with $169,000, whose maverick secretary, Dean Miggle, saw the potential jobs for his members in renewable energy, particularly rooftop solar.
Interesting.
Followed by the CFMEU. Yeah. CFMU chipped in $40,000 and the AMW $30,000. The CFMU's donation was a shock, given its history with the Greens.
Full circle.
How far we've come.
So this wasn't when did we get the donations from what's his name, Graham Wood or whatever, the What If? That's a bit later, isn't it? You know that guy?
I think so. I think it must be, yes. Maybe around the 2010 election when we sort of had that spike particularly. Yes, that's when he starts chipping in, I suppose. I've never heard of this Greg Ban guy, Sydney-based bookmaker, Greg Ban. Another gambling dude, I guess, that we get some cash from.
Another reclusive character.
And I guess people should, like, that is still a big part of the fundraising strategy, right? High net worth individuals, people who have a lot of cash, who happen to be progressive. I mean, they do make up a significant part of the Greens donor base, right?
I think the reason I remember Graham Wood was because because he was an entrepreneur. Like, I guess there was that he has the stink of corporation on him in a way. You know what I mean?
Right.
As opposed to someone like Duncan Turpie, who's just a gambler.
Yeah, but a really good one. So
very good. Very good. Yeah.
Okay, so Howard calls the election in October. He opts for a 39-day campaign. When he announces the election in response to Rudd's been talking about how we need new leadership, John Howard says Australia doesn't need new leadership. It doesn't need old leadership. It needs the right leadership.
Is that meant to be a play on like right as in right-leaning as well? Like I don't know if they're still doing it, but ages ago the LNP in Queensland released their, plan for Queensland, and it's called the Right Priorities for Queensland. And I think right is like capitalized,
Oh, I see. I mean, I don't think so. You don't see the coalition actually sort of talking about that stuff. I mean, neither of the major parties never
true.
sort of say, oh, we need left wing, we need right wing. They just we need a good plan, we need a sensible plan, we need a responsible plan, we need the right policies, not the bad policies. We want to go in the right direction, not the wrong direction, all that kind of shit.
Yeah. It does just, it's probably just my brain mapping that onto it.
The slogans for the campaign: Labor had new leadership, had fresh ideas, and of course, Kevin 07, which again was like always so funny to me because, like, of course, when Gillard Nice Ryder replaces her, they're like, "Hey, you don't vote for a person as prime minister. You actually vote for a political party." I'm like, motherfucker, we had Kevin 07 t-shirts. It was all about Kevin.
Yeah, that's what it was fully.
The coalition had proven leadership for Australia and go for growth. What are your thoughts on those slogans there, Emerald?
Go for growth. That sounds – actually, both of these sound somewhat familiar. Oh, you know what? These probably sound familiar because I would have included them in my assessment. That's probably why. I don't think I genuinely remember these. But go for growth is it's interesting that they – like, Labor is clearly – it's all one idea, which is new, fresh change, whereas Coalition are like proven, stick with what you've got, but also economic growth. And maybe even just trying to have those two ideas at once was too much.
I mean, Howard also said, and I remember this quote, I think this is pretty famous: "Love me or loathe me, you know where I stand on the issues," which I think is like begrudgingly, again, you would have to kind of acknowledge that one of John Howard's strengths.
Yeah.
In my view, just as a political animal, is that
and I think most people do respect,
and people knew where he stood.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think people appreciate that. Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, well, and maybe, in this election campaign in 2007, as the coalition seemed to get increasingly desperate to do anything they could to hang on to power, they were kind of throwing stuff all over the place. And that's when it starts to clash with the idea that John Howard knows what he thinks and says what he thinks, right? If he's like, yeah, we'll do a climate thing, I guess, and hey, here's some tax cuts, and like once you start to feel like you're throwing everything you possibly can.
Yeah, that's right. And it doesn't feel stable and like, yeah. Well, LNP too. I mean, no one knows what they're doing.
Then you've got Kevin Rudd launching the Labor campaign, and I watched this back. He seemed quite nervous, okay, and did a little bit of his classic babble going on. Like, this is a quote: "This election is about Australia's future, and it's an election about a choice, about who offers a new leadership for Australia's future. New leadership to help working families, new leadership with fresh ideas to deal with Australia's future challenges. And what I'm offering the Australian people is new leadership, both to help working families under financial pressure and new leadership for a plan for our country's future."
Tom, is it babbling or is it on message? Because what do you remember? New leadership. It's like at that game, or when you make up a secret language with your friends when you're little and you just add a certain word in between every word, and that's the secret language. Right. And he's like, I'm new leadership, offering new leadership, the Australian new leadership people, new leadership.
guess so. I like my sentences to make sense. I'm crazy that way.
It doesn't make
Maybe
sense. You're
messaging
absolutely right.
is unimportant. Yeah. New leadership for a plan for our country's future. What's the plan?
New leadership.
There you go. The big issues, of course, in this election were work choices was probably number one. That was certainly up there. Work choices, to quote myself from I'm Millennial, one snowflakes agreed against boomers, billionaires, and everything else. Work choices was a complete overhaul of the industrial relations system that junked unfair dismissal laws, restricted union activity, and allowed bosses to shoot an employee out of a cannon if they'd ever had a dream about reading an article about going on strike. That book is available now at all good bookshops, if you like.
That's very good. You can get the audio book as well, and that's pretty much what it sounds like.
Just like that. Sounds like that. Yes, I mean, they'd really lent into everything that the HR Nichols Society, that pressure group that was all about IR reform, basically, attacking unions left, right, and center. I think it was businesses under 100 employees could just, removed any unfair dismissal laws for them, because if you're a small business, of course, you should be able to dismiss people unfairly. And there was really going after the award system and union entry to sites. It was the conservative,
Pretty brutal.
capitalist, liberal wet dream that they managed to get through thanks to their double majority in both houses. Roy Morgan polling in June 2007 reported work choices was a reason for Labor Party support, and a fear of union dominance and support for coalition economic management policy as the biggest reasons behind the coalition vote. Several big business organisations, including the Australian Industry Group, declined a request from the Prime Minister to run advertisements to counter the union-funded campaign. That's the ACTU's Your Rights at Work campaign, which is trying to highlight the fact that work choices suck and therefore you should vote for Labor. The share of voters concerned about industrial relations grew from 31% to 53% in the 2 years to June 2006, with around 3/5 of voters backing Labor's ability to handle the issue over the Liberal Party.
Interesting. Yeah, it feels like it
It was
was
definitely a winner. Yeah, I remember the Your Rights at Work campaign, but I can't remember. Couldn't have told you what the details of the whole thing was at the time.
Yeah, no, I remember just again, I feel like people like my dad or just people that you would see around would have a Your Rights at Work shirt. And yes, you compare that with, what was it? Change the Rules in 2019.
Change the rules.
And it just, I don't know why. Why didn't it have the same traction? Because there wasn't such a clear fucking trashing of the system that they were proposing to reverse. The rules that were to be changed were kind of unclear. But Your Rights at Work, yeah, it was big.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a big problem, right? Because you can be like anti-work choices. Work choices suck. Here's how work choices suck. If we get in, we're going to get rid of work choices. But of course, Rudd does get in, and what do? They get rid of work choices, but they maintain a bunch of that anti-union infrastructure in the Fair Work Commission. And in no way do they, they undo the damage of work choices, I suppose, in a way, but they still maintain a system which really fucks over organised labour and people's ability to win rights at work.
Yeah.
Solidarity strikes are still illegal.
Yeah.
Anything that a union wins still has to flow through to every other worker, whether a member of the union or not. Like, just some pretty structural problems that persist to this day that affect our ability to strike and affect workers' rights to actually assert their rights at work.
Yeah, regardless of the fact that was clearly one of the key issues that won him the election.
Yeah. I thought this was interesting. All this union influence stuff was kicking around, and apparently during one of the debates, this happened. In response to the Liberal Party message that 70% of Labor's front bench was made up of former union officials, Rudd said 70% of Liberal Party ministers were either lawyers or former Liberal Party staffers. On the same day, Peter Costello admitted when questioned that the 70% figure was in reference to union members rather than union officials.
Oh, that's quite different.
Now, that's amazing
really
for two
not the same
reasons.
thing.
Yeah, well, first of all, yes. What a blatant lie. But also, why is only 70% of the union
70%?
of the Labor front bench members of
You
their
should all
union?
be.
Who are these 30% who
Yeah.
aren't members of their fucking union?
Yeah, that's actually wild. Probably like 90% of Greens MPs would be union members.
Totally. Very strange. Health was another big issue in the election. Rudd campaigned on fixing the health system. He wanted to stop the buck passing between Canberra and the states. They announced $2 billion funding to reduce waiting times, but also said, I didn't realize this, if the issue wasn't fixed within 2 years, he was going to have a constitutional referendum on the Commonwealth taking over the health power, basically, which I don't remember this at all. I don't remember
Yeah, and also what
them
did he
talking about
define
that, but
as
that was the plan.
what constitutes the issue being fixed versus not fixed, do you think?
Well, I guess reducing wait times, I suppose, and I guess I remember him using the idea of a Commonwealth takeover of certain hospitals as kind of a threat for certain hospitals to ship up and shape up. There was massive waiting times, and I remember it's always a big issue in Tassie, of course.
Mm.
But yes, fixing the health system was the general vibe.
Mm. Okay.
Do you remember the debate between Nicola Roxon and Tony Abbott?
Who's
This was
Nicola
quite a big
Roxon?
deal. Nicola Roxon was the shadow health minister and would become the health minister eventually. I forget where she fell. I think she stood by Kevin Rudd during the coup and everything.
Okay.
But yes, she was out there a fair bit. They had a debate. Abbott's character and ministerial capacity were questioned by Roxon for his comments about terminally ill asbestos campaigner Bernie Banton. I remember that. And for arriving 35 minutes late to the debate. At the end of the debate, Roxon suggested to Abbott that he could have arrived on time if he'd really wanted to which Abbott replied, "That's bullshit."
What?
Have you ever seen this? There's like footage of
No.
it. He's on camera and
And he just goes,
clearly
"That's
says
bullshit."
it. He clearly thought that he could say that and get away with it. Yes. But he sort of says it while smiling, and it is at the end of the debate and he's kind of trying to be like, "That's fuck you, that's bullshit." But it's like so clear.
I
what he's
also don't
saying.
understand. It doesn't feel like an appropriate place to say that's bullshit because it's like clearly, I don't know. She's just saying you could have arrived on time. What's bullshit about that?
Yes. I guess the mask came off, Tony. But it was a classic kind of, Tony Abbott, that guy's never going to go anywhere in politics.
Tony Abbott. And then he ate an onion.
The economy, of course, economic considerations was a big issue as well. Peter Costello was using the same slogan they used in 2004. The economy is like a highly engineered racing car. And I tell you what, I wouldn't be putting an L-plater driver in the cockpit at the moment.
Jesus Christ.
Do cars have cockpits? I guess they do. August 2007 saw for the first time during an election campaign a 0.25 point interest rate rise to 6.5% by the Reserve Bank, the sixth rise since the last election in 2004. Interest rates, massive issue. Labor constantly saying, you can't trust John Howard to keep interest rates low. Then they got another interest rate rise in November 2007 to a 10-year high. The interest rate was at 6.75%. Which we'd have to say is quite high. Our current interest rate is lower than that,
yes.
but I think it's about the number of rights we've had and for how long that's been sustained.
Yeah, was this just before? Yeah, just before the the GFC, global financial crisis.
Yes, that wouldn't. I mean, the factors you could sort of predict the GFC, that things were going south in the US at this time, but the actual crash wouldn't kick in until 2008. September, particularly, I think, is when Lehman Brothers collapses just before the presidential election, just before Obama kicks in.
Yeah.
Howard said he would strive to achieve full employment, which he argued would be less likely under a Rudd government. Unemployment at the time was at 4.3%. Of course, when Howard says full employment, he doesn't actually mean what any normal person would think. That is, everyone who wants a job gets a job. He means the bullshit neoliberal version of that, which still sees a whole bunch of people languishing in poverty on unemployment benefits. On the first full day of the campaign, Howard and Costello announced a major restructuring of the income tax system with tax cuts worth $35 billion over 3 years and a tax cut goal for the next 5 years. It was the largest tax cut proposed in Australia.
Chump change.
Yeah.
These little babies, they know nothing about tax cuts.
And you'd think, wow, conservative government like John Howard announcing a massive tax cut away to already wealthy people, like surely a Labor Party would oppose that and say that's actually quite bad.
Just like they do
a few days
now.
later, Rudd released his policy, which supported the reform measures. However, he offered education and health tax rebates instead of immediate cuts to the top rate as proposed by the Liberal Party, with a slower progression for the top rate. So this is a big recurring theme, this idea of a Me Tooism, right? But obviously before that phrase had another meaning. But Rudd was constantly saying, yeah, I agree with that, me too, trying to negate these kind of political contrasts between the two parties, and one of them being a massive tax giveaway. to people who did not need it. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, I guess it
Do you remember that
it
bit?
does somewhat everything in my life. I'm going to obviously compare to where I am right now, which is Queensland state election. But it's like you have a very long term and tired old government that everyone expects has probably run its course and is going to lose, and then will kind of desperately try to announce these policies that are popular, direct support, like the things that people are going to like. And yeah, the insurgent party is just kind of like, well, yeah, us too, just neutralizes it one by one, like 50-cent fares, for example, Labor announcing that. And just when it's like, oh, maybe it'll be enough to get them back, the LNP is like, nah, us too, us as well. So still better vote for us.
They haven't done that with the free school lunches though, right? Like
no,
the LNP wouldn't be
interestingly,
on
they
board, that
have
kind of stuff.
been, it's very interesting. They're staunchly opposed to free school lunches. They really, really think children should just pull themselves up by their fucking bootstraps and, you know, do a hard day's work for once and buy their own lunch. Stop mooching off the government teat. Are we supposed to have weaned children off by the time they get to primary school? And yet, what, you want to give them a bloody sandwich? It's disgusting. Put them in jail. That's their answer so far. But
annoyingly, it's probably going to work for them though, or at least that won't be the deciding factor. That will
won't be
see
the
them
yeah.
remain in opposition.
Too little, too late from Labor, sadly.
Yeah. You got climate and environment as well, sort of a big factor. Often, I think 2007 was perhaps the first election to be called the climate election in its own way. This is from Paddy Manning's Inside the Greens. For the first time since the 1990 federal election, the environment was smack bang in the middle of the national agenda. The millennium drought worsened throughout 2006, then the driest year on record, and Australia's climate anxiety ratcheted up. Polls at this time showed that Australians were the most concerned population about the impact of climate change of any surveyed around the world. By early 2007, 76% of people considered it a major problem. Only 5% thought it was not a problem.
Wow.
And 77% indicated that they were prepared to pay more if it would help reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Damn.
It's also tragic, isn't it? Like just reading it, obviously we know what happens, right? And so it's all just sort of tinged.
I know,
with
it's
this,
so sad. Yeah, it's like
tragedy.
watching the Titanic, I assume, because I haven't watched it. But if I were to watch the Titanic, this is what it would be like, because I would know what happens.
Right. John Howard, in his memoir Lazarus Rising, wrote that between the drought, Al Gore's film An Inconvenient Truth, and the United Kingdom's Stern Review, he faced a perfect storm on climate change. Ironic. Howard had stuck by President George W. Bush in refusing to sign the Kyoto Protocol, even though his government had negotiated an extremely favourable deal in 1998. We've talked about that before on the pod, while declaring that Australia would meet its targets anyway. It was a nonsensical position, barely supported even within his own cabinet, and Labor leader Kevin Rudd made easy political yards by committing to sign Kyoto if elected. Realising he needed to do something, Howard added the environment to Malcolm Turnbull's duties as water minister and tasked him with developing a cap-and-trade emissions trading scheme. For the first time in Australia, and perhaps the world, climate change was a significant election issue, and domestically there was bipartisan consensus about how it might best be tackled, with a price on carbon.
Done and dusted. Consensus. That's so good.
That should be all sorted.
Great.
Other little issues that were bubbling away. Labor pledged a $4.7 billion fibre to the node broadband network. Remember,
is this
fibre
like
to
NBN
the node and fibre
Mark
to the
1?
premises and all that?
Or
yes.
It's different to.
That's
is it like
what
NBN?
The original vision for the NBN was.
Yeah.
That is the NBN, which then, when the coalition takes over, becomes fibre to the premises.
Yeah.
No, fibre to the node? Oh, he wanted fibre to the node? Fibre to the premises is the good one, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway. God, I remember briefly getting my head around that at some point. Anyway. Yes, Labor's original proposal. The vision was good of, good internet for everybody, but of course the way that all worked out did not go well. You've got the education revolution, free laptops, as you mentioned.
So does that
Rudd
mean
advocated
if you
4-year fixed terms?
Sorry, just on because for me the laptops that's the thing I remember, like I said. So, but you graduated before you got a laptop, is that right?
I distinctly remember not caring about that policy because I was like, well, I'm about to leave high
Not
school,
going
so
to
I'm
get a
not getting a
laptop.
laptop. What do I,
Well,
what
I
the
got a
fuck do
Rudd
I care?
laptop. But
Oh, yes.
it was like if they wanted to give you a laptop, but like stripping away any functionality. And I don't even know if this thing accessed the internet. It was the weirdest thing. I remember it had like a photo booth. I remember you could take selfies on it in class, and some sort of like word processing
Right.
system. But it was like small and red and really not like a normal computer, to the point that then I think what the interesting thing was that I guess it got some of us used to bringing laptops to school, and so we would start then bringing our own laptops if we had one. But yeah, I remember
Mm.
getting my little laptop. Thanks, Kevin.
Well, yeah. Do we have any data on like whether that changed everything? I mean,
Well,
because
they were
not
so
long after this, I guess
useless.
everyone would have phones.
Yeah,
You're
like
right.
I think it was more a cultural change than an actual useful thing. Like I think, yes, opening up the possibility of using computers in classrooms was an important step forward. But like I don't know if other schools were different, but certainly none of us could figure out how to fucking use them or make them useful in any way at all. So you just kind of had them, you could barely use them.
Great. Yeah, I mean, of course, if you actually want an education revolution, you would do something about the funding of public
Yes.
schools. And of course, Gillard would go on to do the Gonski Review, but would refuse to change anything about the funding of private schools,
Yeah.
and would never be prepared to redirect the funding of public money to private schools into the public system. This is key. It's like no school will ever be worse off, which of course was always going to fuck you over regardless. But
Yeah.
laptop sounds good, and I guess you'll remember it forever.
I do remember it. I remember it fondly.
Yeah. He was also campaigning on 4-year fixed terms for federal parliaments if elected. Howard supported 4-year terms but opposed fixed election dates. Of course, they'd have to have a referendum to change any of that. Howard was also talking about if he was re-elected, they'd do another referendum on the inclusion of a statement of reconciliation in the preamble of the Constitution.
That's funny.
It tried to do that in 1999 with a terrible statement that was also voted down by the Australian people.
What's Sean's
Good
special?
stuff. I just want to include this. We had the leaders' debate, of course, on Channel 9, which included the worm. Do you remember
Yes.
the
I know
worm?
about the worm, yeah.
What did it say here? Extended version of 60 Minutes. They used the worm in its broadcast despite prior objections from the Liberal Party and action from the National Press Club to cease its video feed. As a result, the Nine Network's feed was cut partway into the broadcast, which Nine then replaced with Sky News' coverage. The Nine television network's live audience via the Worm's average scored the debate 65-29 in Rudd's favour, with 6%
Amazing.
remaining undecided. Both sides, however, claimed victory. Nine had a separate group of 80 it said were swinging voters, chosen by McNair Research, in its studio to control the worm. Steps were taken to ensure equal numbers so as not to taint the worm.
You never want to taint the worm. God forbid the worm be tainted. It's a pure, democratic, the worm of democracy. The worm speaks only the truth.
All hail the worm. How about this? On the 21st of November, 3 days before the election, fake pamphlets were distributed in the electorate of Lindsay, which purported to be from an Islamic group. The group was non-existent, and the pamphlets thanked the Labor Party for supporting the Bali bombers and encouraged people to vote Labor. Those involved included a member of the Liberal State Executive, Jeff Egan, Gary Clark, husband of retiring MP Jack Kelly, and Greg Zhishoff, the husband of Lindsay candidate Karen Zhishoff. Kelly said the incident was a Chaser-style prank.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I think there were court proceedings over that. I can't remember what.
Right,
But,
I can imagine.
No good, I reckon.
Christ, that's really something. It's really something.
Labor was doing these things too, where they was putting up pre-election campaign billboards featuring a picture of John Howard with the quote, working families in Australia have never been better off, which looked like Liberal Party advertisements, but were actually paid for by the Labor Party. Isn't that interesting? Because they use that quote like to death, right? This idea where John Howard said he's trying to prove his record. Hey, things are going great economically. And then, of course, Labor saying, really, team, do you feel like you're better off?
Yeah, that's such a kind of risky strategy. But I guess if the mood at the time, and clearly it was, like similar to now, that people's lives are worse than they, things are harder than they have been in the past, and you see something like that from the Prime Minister, you would get mad.
And I was looking at some of this. I just remember just the cheesy shininess of Kevin Rudd ads. Okay, let's maybe just look at one of them here. And
share
they
it
kind
with
of
me. Hit me with it.
kind of turns my stomach, but obviously it works. So what the fuck do I know? But here we go.
Kevin Rudd.
This year I've been talking to people all over Australia, including back here in this part of country Queensland where I grew up. This is a great country, and what struck me is there's so much we all have in common. We want the best for our families, for our kids to one day afford their own home, for every young person to get a first-class education, a decent hospital system, and a workplace that's fair and balanced. This election's about the future, and it's our common goals that have helped shape my future plans for an education revolution, including preschools, trades, as well as universities. Real action now on climate change. A national plan to fix our hospitals by ending buck passing between Canberra and the States. And a workplace that's fair and balanced. An economy that's strong, but one that also delivers for Australian working families. It's our common goals that have made our country great in the past. And if we stick with them, they'll keep Australia great into the future.
Oh, God.
Keep Australia great.
I mean, just so generic, so vague, which I guess any political ad is going to be. But it's like,
I know,
it's
but
like,
I don't
yes,
think...
we want a strong economy. We want a fair workplace. It's like, it's sort of like identifying the issues without actually really indicating what the fuck you got to do about any of that. But I
actually don't think you can get away with like an ad like that anymore. But I think you used to be able to. I think it was just like, I think probably, yes, the work of ads has been honed a lot and sharpened a bit in terms of political ads, because that's the kind of ad that, again, like that looks like the ad I made when I had to make one for a political campaign in uni. It's just like health, education, our economy and families, all things that we want to support into the future because we're working for you tomorrow and today. Like
and a little bit yesterday.
Anything.
And also...
And yesterday, yeah.
I'd love you to be like work, families, education, health, dismantling the capitalist state, funding the proletariat revolution.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, funnily enough, our Labor ad, because we ran, like it was a quote-unquote Labor campaign, I think our candidate was a former teacher. We were trying to be like our idea of typical Labor, right? So they were a former teacher and their campaign was centered around education. And so I think that the ad that we ran was actually something like, our economy, our healthcare, blah, 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 something. It all starts in our schools. And then it was all about supporting education. But it's the same vibe, the education revolution. Very Kevin Rudd.
Yeah. I mean, there's also sort of no enemies in that ad too. And I guess they obviously did identify Howard as the enemy and use that a lot. But like, it's all very positive, shiny.
It's surprising,
we just need to work together,
they're not
common goals. Let's do good things.
Well, I guess they didn't need to attack. That's the thing. Like, you didn't even need to attack Howard. It's just he was so established and so hated.
Here's another one, actually. I think this has some interesting points to it. This is also going after that line about feeling like you've never been better off.
Everyone agrees that a strong economy is the foundation for Australia's future. But now, despite the big picture on the economy appearing good, under the surface, many family budgets are simply stretching to breaking point. Mr. Howard says that working families have never been better off. But housing is becoming less affordable and taking more and more of the family budget. Mr. Howard has broken his promise on interest rates. We've now had 9 increases in a row. And the rising cost of petrol, groceries, childcare, and the loss of penalty rates and overtime under work choices, people are asking if the economy is doing so well, why aren't we? I'm an economic conservative. I'll keep the budget in surplus on average over the economic cycle, keep the independence of the Reserve Bank, all to keep interest rates low. But I'll do whatever I can to reduce the strain on household budgets, particularly for first home buyers. I want to keep the economy strong, but I want to make sure it delivers for Australia's working families.
Interesting. Right. So I didn't realise how hard he's going. I guess this is something that, I must not have grasped when I was younger, that he's going for an economic conservative, social progressive thing. Like, you can trust me, don't worry, hand over the reins to me, and I'm going to keep the economy strong, but also I know that doing that so far hasn't worked out so well for you, so things are going to be different under me because of new leadership.
Yeah, well, I mean, socially progressive. I mean, again, still not supporting gay marriage. If that is kind of an indication of where
Yeah,
you
but
said
don't you think
socially
it was sort
progressive,
of the
still
vibe?
avoiding that issue.
Yeah.
But that was certainly the vibe. Yeah, I mean, it's. I think the debate still rages as to whether Rudd won with the Rudd slide,
Mm,
promising big new change with something like a bold agenda. I think that's certainly what a lot of people want to say. When you want to criticize Labor for taking a small agenda policy to an election, you say, well, look at Kevin Rudd, big ideas, education revolution, going after the Pacific solution,
mm,
ratifying Kyoto Protocol. People would argue he did have a big positive vision for the future, but often the response to that is, well, no, actually look at what he said, which was constantly like, yeah,
yeah.
economic conservative, sensible solutions. He was a guy in a suit. He was a
Don't be
Christian, family
afraid.
values,
I mean, God, that ad
yeah.
though,
Yes,
like,
don't be afraid.
who you would be fucking, you would be fired if you produced that for a political campaign now, right? Like, it's just this boring, long sentences, like long cuts, the most just, stock music, like strumming guitar while even when he's delivering kind of like attack lines, it's like la 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 la
Yeah.
la la. It's like a Gilmore Girls episode while he's like, you know, it's really hard to pay the rent. That really felt so dated.
Even this, look, okay, sorry, we'll maybe just watch this one more because I think
All
this
right,
is
one more, one
important.
more, one more.
These are certainly my memories of the campaign was seeing these ads. I guess never truly appreciating that these weren't actually, technically weren't Labor ads. They were the ACTU ads about the Your Rights at Work
Right,
thing. But
yeah.
like for an attack ad, look how intense this is.
Hello. Oh, hi, Mr. White.
The federal government is scrapping unfair dismissal laws for 3.6 million workers.
No, sorry, I can't. I'm rostered on for tomorrow night's shift.
So if you think that you and your family are safe...
But who's going to look after my kids?
Think again.
You can't sack me. Really?
Authorised Greg Combay, ACTU Melbourne.
Oh my God, not the kids. Not the children sitting on the couch. Like, I forget. Yes, sorry. This is not a visual medium. She is like on the couch with her beautiful little children, and then the phone rings and she picks it up, and that's the voice that she hears, I get, or it's kind of like the voiceover, but the kids are just like looking up at her like, Mummy, are we not going to be able to eat?
Mummy. They're all, I would say, with that ad and the two Rudd things, extremely white, can I say? Like,
very white. Very white. Yes. I don't think there's a brown person in sight.
But it's kind of like, I mean, I guess that's the kind of call maybe you would get, but it was also just a bit like, anyway, she was concerned, and the idea of unfair dismissal laws would be bad, and of course they did paint the picture of the kind of power that bosses had, but yeah, just in terms of like a terrifying vision of the horrific future, it was pretty muted, I guess. But hey, again, it worked. Who knows? Here are the results on election night. Seven went with a new election coverage team for 2007, led by Sunrise hosts David Koch and Melissa Doyle, who were assisted by journalist Mark Riley and game show host Andrew O'Keefe. And that to me is just like peak Australian media 2007 right there.
Wow. Oh, we miss it. So what happened?
Spoiler alert, Kevin Rudd won. It was the Rudd slide. They won 23 seats. They had a primary vote of 43.38%, 5.7% swing to Labor generally. So, yes, consider landslide or a Rudd slide, as it was commonly referred to. Coalition lose 22 seats from 87 to 65. They actually picked up some seats in WA, won them off Labor, weirdly. But yes, down to 65 seats, a primary of 42.09%. The two-party preferred was 53 to 47, which is pretty much what the polls were predicting across the board.
Yeah, okay.
It is the last election when both major parties would get a primary of over 40%. And it was the last time the National Party received over 5% of the vote in the House of Representatives. Most famously, in the seat of Bennelong, John Howard's seat, Maxine McHugh was victorious. Howard had held the seat since 1974. It had been in Liberal hands ever since its creation in 1949. But Maxine McHugh, after a very long count, it was very close. She did remove little Johnny Howard from power.
Little Johnny Howard.
The concession speeches were interesting because, of course, Kevin Rudd does. He's like, "Hey, I want to pay tribute to John Howard for his years of service," and you could feel there's a tension in the Labor Party room where people want to be like, "Boo," and be like, "Fuck that guy, and he sucks." But like Kevin Rudd's like, don't do that. We're the sensible new leadership, third way. We don't hate John Howard.
I'm an economic conservative.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And sort of the same way where John Howard says, "I congratulated Rudd," and people in the Liberal Party room are like, "Boo!" Fuck that guy. And again, people love John Howard. People are yelling out, "Love you, Johnny. You're the best. We've done so much for this country." They fucking love him.
Lots of walks. A lot of walks. Has anyone ever added up all the kilometres of walking he did?
He did a lot of them.
Don't know. Think about that for a second, hey?
Greens got a national vote of 7.79%. On preferences, 79% of Green voters flowed to Labor. You could very well say that off Greens' preferences, Labor won a lot of these seats.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. We got 5 senators in the end. Bob Brown won very easily. It was the first time a Green senator had won in his own right. He didn't need to go to preferences for Bob Brown to keep his Senate seat. He'd optimistically tipped the Greens would pick up seats in Victoria, WA and the ACT, and that Kerry Nettle would hold her spot in New South Wales. He would be disappointed. Kerry Nettle...
Not the first time.
Yes, many times. She won 8.4%, but she lost on Christian Democrat preferences. Sarah Hanson-Young wins in an upset in South Australia. She's the youngest woman ever elected to Parliament. Scott Ludlam enters the...
How old was she? Do you know?
25, I believe.
Yeah, wow.
And we'll come to this. I read a bit of the Inside the Greens chapter on the 2007 election. I didn't know this. She got pre-selected, then she fell pregnant and got a lot of pressure from within the South Australian Greens. People being like, "Oh, well, you should have told us and you should drop out now because you're pregnant." Some
Yikes,
really toxic,
dog.
Yes, sexist stuff going on there.
Jesus.
Scott Ludlam gets elected with 9% primary vote. Welcome, Mr. Hot Ludlam, into the WA Parliament in the Senate, illegally, of course, as a New Zealand citizen.
Illegally, yeah, he snuck in despite his foreign allegiances. Yeah, this is the first time this dissident, this foreign dissident.
This agent of the New Zealand government infiltrates our Parliament.
That's right. Under the cover of the bluster, the flub and bluster of Kevin 07.
Richard Di Natale lost his bid. That's his 5th election attempt across state and federal. And apparently he was prepared to throw in the towel in 2007. He thought he tried so many times. It might be it for him.
He's like, I'm never going to make it.
Never going to make it. The outcome was an upper house in which the Greens were stronger with 5 senators but had to share the balance of power with Xenophon and Family First. The Democrats were wiped out. In the lower house, the party's best performance was in Melbourne, where Adam Band polled 23% on first preferences within 600 votes of the second-placed Liberal, which forced Labor's Lindsay Tanner to rely on preferences to win his once safe seat. The second best result was in the seat of Sydney with 21% primary vote. I looked up in 2022, we're still sitting around 23% there. We've got to figure out winning
in Sydney.
The seat
Interesting,
of Sydney,
yeah.
With 5 representatives in Parliament, the Greens were afforded official parliamentary party status, which meant more staff resources and legitimacy. Party status was no small thing. It had been 15 years and 6 federal elections since the Australian Greens had formed, and decades more if the movement were traced back to its roots. Post-war, only 2 other minor parties had achieved this, the DLP and the Democrats, and both had now lost it. The Greens were, indisputably, the third force in Australian politics.
Slay.
Thank you, Paddy Manning.
Wow. So that's why 2007 always felt like an important election to me. Maybe it was because I knew that's when we became the Greens political party.
But yeah, officially. I mean, as we were saying before, we shouldn't discount. I mean, I was so relieved. I was excited. I think there was a lot of hope and optimism around what Kevin Rudd represented, what a change of government meant, the not conservative people were in, Howard was out. Hey, good things were going to happen. I mean, nothing is going to have bad like a global financial crisis or... and surely this party that's been out of power for so long just came back in with this massive majority. They're not going to politically assassinate the very guy who led that entire campaign.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say immediately after the election, this is a little bit of foreboding here, but The Labour caucus met on that Thursday to confirm the first Rudd ministry, which was sworn in on the 3rd of December. In a departure from Labour tradition, the ministry was selected by Kevin Rudd as the Prime Minister rather than by caucus. Now...
Red flag. Red flag.
Uh-oh, Kevin.
They should have known.
I mean, again, I've never been convinced by this idea that Kevin Rudd was such... I mean, Kevin Rudd clearly was a control freak and was a difficult man to work with. But the way they went about removing him was an absolute shit show as well that was never adequately expressed to the people. And they had so much goodwill and such a lead in the polls that what happened to him was ridiculous. But you read things like that and you go, oh, yeah, I see how this egomaniac might have become an intolerable bastard.
Yes, egomaniac. It's a good way to put it, I think.
Final thoughts and feelings on the 2007 election?
What a time. What a time indeed. I mean, yeah, it felt okay at the time. What were we saying? Was this actually before we were recording that we were like, things just felt lighter then? It felt, this is actually, no, it was Mike and I were talking about this while you were trying to sort out your fucking internet. It just felt like the stakes were lower in some way. Do you know what I mean? Everyone could just, and I said, like, I don't know if that is partly because it feels more acceptable to talk about to talk about politics in a sincere way in your everyday life now and socially. But back then it felt like it was something that really we were all just kind of laughing at, and then we would put it aside and move on with our lives.
I guess so. I find it very hard to differentiate between, where I was at in life and what the vibe was across the country. I mean, certainly, yes, the stakes of politics in the post-global financial crisis, post-Trump, worsening climate crisis, COVID, the collapse of social fabric. I think that's certainly gotten worse in the 2010s. That's certainly true. Interestingly, actually, I looked up the ANU's election study. It looks like the trends over all the elections. And this year, 2007 election had the highest recording of satisfaction with democracy at 86%. And another interesting fact, this is the only year in which there was a higher support for the idea of more spending on social services than there was for less tax, if you know what I mean. So 47% of people favoured spending more on social services rather than lowering tax in 2007. That's the only year that's ever happened. So, pretty interesting sort of spike. Clearly the mood was there and the country was ready for something different and something a bit more progressive. Yeah.
And I think we were like, we would like to vote for someone who isn't John Howard now. And then we were allowed to do that. And we were like, hey, look at us with our little democracy. Not bad. Not too shabby. Hey?
I hope no one squanders this within 3 years, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. Oh, I liked it. I mean, what election what's your favorite election so far? Well, apart from 2022. Is 2022 your favorite?
2022 is when I've had the most fun on election night. Yes, hands down.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously.
All the others have been quite depressing. And I guess 2007 was cool too, yes, but all the others
maybe 2007 second.
Have been quite depressing. 2019, probably the worst one.
Oh, 2019, no good. No thanks.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
It was all worth it because we got to do this special edition of our show for Patreon. Do
you forget what the show's called? It's called Serious Danger, everyone. Yeah. Thanks for making it to the end.
Appreciate it. Thanks for supporting the show, as always. Send us an email if you like, hello@seriousdangerpod.com. Or just share it around. We know you support the show here financially, which is very kind, but if you'd also give us a 5-star review on the old Apple or whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts, we'd appreciate it.
The old Apple. Hop on your little Kevin Rudd laptop, see if you can find a browser, navigate to seriousdangerpod.com or something. I don't really know. But see if you can figure it out. And if you can host this. You can become Prime Minister, actually.
Well said. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Serious Danger Australia.